Hello and welcome to Module 6. Congratulations, you are officially halfway through the course and you only have 5 modules remaining. So great work so far. And for those who have been teaching in a public school setting, congratulations on finishing out your school year this past week. As we move into Module 6, just like with Module 5, this module has 2 chapters, Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. So you will have a week and a half to complete this module as well. Everything in Module 6 will be due by Sunday, July 2nd, so you do have that extended time period. I'm going to go ahead and move into Blackboard so we can chat about a few things that you'll be working on during this module. There we go. Okay. So in Module 6, you'll see that the focus of Module 6 is on comprehension. These 2 chapters pair together really nicely. Chapter 7 focuses more on the theory behind comprehension, as well as the different strategies that you will teach within the class. Now, this is different than teaching strategies per se. These are comprehension strategies that your students will need to be able to master in order to comprehend the different texts that you are incorporating into your class. So as you go through Chapter 7, really look at the different skills or strategies that students will need to learn as they go through their classroom. So for example, you might need to teach topic and main idea and details, and then from there move on to summarizing. You may want to teach some almost pre-reading activities such as previewing and questioning before you even start reading the text. You may work with your students on pulling out specific information from the text and then mapping it or organizing it in some way so that they can make sense of that information. So as you go through Chapter 7, think about all of those strategies or skills, specifically how they would fit into your classroom, okay, so that you can work on applying that information. So again, Chapter 7 will focus on those actual strategies, and then Chapter 8 now looks at it from the teacher perspective, where you're looking at the different types of texts that you may be working with and the different structures. So narrative, expository, and so forth. So look at those different types of text that you could be using, and as a teacher you want to make sure that you're not only using expository texts, you're not only using fiction, you're not only using nonfiction, etc. You definitely want to make sure you're incorporating a mix of those so students are having experience with all different types of texts and text structures. As you get into the specific text, you're going to look at if the author is using cause and effect, or if the author is using description, or a fair amount of examples, or sequencing, timeline, and so forth. If you can help your students to understand those text structures within the materials that they're reading, that will help them to break down the content so they can better understand it. And so as you're choosing your different lessons and activities for them to work through those texts, they can match up some of their strategies with the actual type of text. Okay, so Chapter 8 looks at it from that angle, and you'll also learn about several different teaching procedures that you can use, such as guided reading and directed reading thinking activity, close procedures, and so forth. And there's some really great examples within that chapter. Make sure if you're using the ebook to go to the different links that are in there because they have great examples for you. Okay. All right, so as you're going through Chapter 6 and 7, 7 and 8, it's all focused on comprehension. There are 2 quizzes, as you would expect, one for Chapter 7 and one for Chapter 8. Okay. As you look into project, let me scroll down here a little bit. As you look into the assignments for this module, it should look very familiar. You have your Chapter 7 and 8 study guides that you can use in there, the different activities that you can use to work with some of the content. You've got your anticipation guide at the beginning of Chapter 7 and 8, and then you look at it again at the end. Now that right there is a comprehension strategy. That's a way to preview the text and to think about your assumptions about the content, and then you look at it again at the end. So that right there is a great strategy that you've been using all semester. Okay, your discussion board forum for this semester, or for this module, you will be choosing one comprehension strategy from Chapter 7, and you'll be looking at activity or figure 7.2. Let me move over to the discussion board so I can make sure I'm telling you the exact right thing here. Okay. When you're looking at this comprehension strategy lesson, you're going to choose one of your comprehension strategies and look at table 7.2 in chapter 7. In 7.2, the authors list 7 specific tasks that you will want to accomplish in your strategy lesson. And what I want you to do is to choose one of those strategies and apply it to your classroom. Think about the grade level that you want to be working with. Think about, perhaps if you're already in a classroom, think about the grade level that you're working with now. And make that classroom strategy lesson specific to the students that you are working with. You certainly can link this in with a content area. So if you're integrating literacy into a content area, you can make sure to tie that lesson and tie the specific examples that you're using into that content area so you can make it work the best for you. Okay? Again, this is a blind discussion board, so you'll post yours and then you'll be able to see everybody else's for your replies. Okay? As you go into project 6, okay, let me move back into project 6 over here. Okay, as you move into project 6, you've got 6 different activities here. Again, you're looking at your key vocabulary and your terms. Okay. You're looking at the different comprehension strategies in action. Okay, so you're going to start to apply some of that with you. I'm going to see if I can share this right here for you. Okay, here we go. All right, so we've got activity 1. The vocabulary that you have in here is a mixture from chapters 6 and 7, so you'll see some are more on the comprehension strategy side and some are more on the teaching procedure side. Okay. Your definition and description, note in the directions that all of this is now in your own words. In the earlier modules, in the first couple modules, you were able to pull them straight from the text, but right now I'd really like you to put this in your own words and really describe that term, okay, and then how you would use that in your literacy classroom. I didn't identify the number of uses here, so you can choose, but really give some thought to this so that it is a thoughtful and purposeful activity that you could use, within your classroom. Activity 2, you've got a handful of video clips. They're pretty short, but it gives you some different comprehension strategies in action, so you can see how that would look within the class, and then you're going to identify some takeaways that you can bring to your own classroom. This will be helpful to do probably before you do your discussion board so that you can then see what you would use within your own class. Okay. As we look into activity 3, as we look into activity 3, we have a case study here, a comprehension case study with a student named Pablo, and he's having some difficulty with comprehension. So what you're going to do is identify some different strategies that you could use with Pablo and explain really how that's going to help him with different types of comprehension. Okay, and so you're going to basically do a problem solution activity here where you're going to provide a solution for Pablo in comprehension. As you're getting into activity 4, here you're now developing a QAR. The chapter talks about QAR and breaks it down for you step by step, but what I'd like you to do here is choose some piece of literature, whether it's a chapter, whether it's a certain story or a passage from a content area textbook. You choose a piece of reading material, and then design a QAR activity based on that content. Okay. Use the guidelines that are within the text, and then you're going to look at the 4 different levels of QAR and identify some questions that you could ask at each of those 4 levels. So what you'll put in your project here are those questions for each of those levels. Okay. All right, and then as you move into activity 5, let me pull this up here. Okay. Activity 5, you are going to need, maybe the other way, you are going to need a student or an adult to work with. If you don't have access to a student now that school is out, you can certainly pair up with one of your classmates here in this class, or you can use a family member for sure. It would be better if it were with a student, but if you're unable to find one for this activity, you may use an adult. Okay, and here you're going to develop what's called reciprocal questioning or request, again using some sort of book, whether it's a storybook or a content area book. You could even use a textbook if you needed to. Okay, if you're working with an adult here, but really you would have used this for a younger grade level, just make sure to discuss that in your summary. So you can explain how that part went. But I want you to go through and develop the reciprocal questioning activity here, work with your student or your adult, and then summarize that experience there. Okay, and again, our textbook for this class walks you through that whole process in lesson 7.5. Okay, so that's very helpful. And then your final activity here, activity 6, here you're watching a video clip from Scholastic on guided reading. We've talked a little bit about guided reading in earlier modules, but here this one goes through with some older students from the previous one we saw. But look at those different stages that are identified in the guided reading activity. And then in your response, you're going to explain really your understanding of those stages, but also how you could apply that to your classroom. And then the last part of this is you want to make sure to see how you can use a guided reading activity to help your students to think critically. Okay, so yes, they're comprehending the material, but now they're taking it a step further, and perhaps they're making some inferences, perhaps they're making comparisons and contrasts to other texts that they've been reading, perhaps they're pulling in even some critical reading or critical thinking, critical writing skills, where they're perhaps bringing in some social justice topics and so forth. So really think about how you can take that lesson or that strategy of guided reading and bring it back out into society or into their ability to really think critically with that content. Okay. All right, so that gives you a rundown of the project. Okay. There's one other thing I wanted to make sure to remind you of at this point in the semester. You are halfway through the semester. Okay. You've gotten the routine down. You, from what I am seeing, you are understanding how the different modules work. I want you to take some time during this module, especially if you haven't over the last couple modules, and think about those culminating activities that you'll have at the end of the semester. You'll see down at the bottom of your course content, you do have the culminating assessments folder. Sure, you can't get into your final exam just yet, but you can start thinking about that philosophy of teaching literacy statement. We've talked about this before in earlier modules. You do have a video here. If you haven't watched it already on your culminating assessments, I strongly encourage you to do that. It would be very helpful for you right now to make some notes of content that you would like to include in your philosophy of teaching literacy statement. The statement is not going to be terribly long, but it needs to include concrete information about how you're going to teach literacy within your classroom. Okay, so again, if you haven't already, go ahead and read through these guidelines. You've got them right here. Watch the video where I talk about this assignment in more detail, and start to jot down some of your ideas. so that you will be ready when the time comes to write out your statement. I would even encourage you to write a draft of it now, and then as you go through the remaining 5 modules, you can continue to add and tweak your statement to include the information that you'll be learning for the remainder of the course. But this would be very wise to get going on this right now. Okay. All right. As always, if you have any questions about, let me stop sharing here. Okay. If you have any questions about the content, okay. If you have any questions about the content in Module 6, certainly reach out. You can use the help forum. Several of you are using that help forum this semester and getting some feedback from your classmates. You can certainly email me as well. If you even want to set up a time to just chat about where you are so far this semester in the course, we can set up a Blackboard Collaborate session. So just shoot me an email and we can set up a time to do that. Okay? Have fun in Module 6 and enjoy learning about different comprehension strategies.